So this is Mohini Miss from Teresa school, and I will be teaching history, and I'll be starting right from the beginning, from the first chapter, and I would like to tell you one thing, and that is this online class is just a supportive to encourage you, to make you familiar with the syllabus that you will have to cover in class 12. And this is not a rush. We are not in a rush to finish the syllabus. We just want to make you familiar. So I will be discussing the first chapter, remembering the past. And before I start the first chapter, I will do a short prayer. O God, cleanse my mind, renew me with a new vigor, and help me pour out your love and your joy on my dear children. So, the chapter is remembering the past, and I will be dealing with you straight with the question and answers. I will discuss the question, and then I will tell you the answers. And the first question that I will be dealing is about the myths. What are myths, legends, folk tales, memoirs, and oral traditions? And this question actually is a very important question for you. This question is actually divided into two parts. In the previous year, what are myths and memories came? Previous year, many years back. So, legends, what are legends? What are folk tales? What are oral traditions? Can also come. So, these actually I am dealing with the two parts here. So, it's about the myths, legends, folk tales. So, myths, legends, folk tales, memories, and oral traditions, they are either stories or events, or they are records which are handed down to us from generation to generation. And their purpose is to inculcate cultural values and the values of life. Cultural values are unity, harmony among different religions, and values of life are sincerity, truthfulness, gratitude. So all these values they try to inculcate. So, what are myths now? Myths, the subject of myths are mankind and universe, and the characters are mostly gods and goddesses, and they explain timeless questions like who made the world? Who were the first people on earth? What happened when we die? And the word myth comes from the Greek word mythos, meaning the word of mouth. And these myths are not based on facts. And they explain how natural events occurred before history was even written. So this is a myth. And the examples of myth. There are various examples. One such example is the Hindu mythology. It is the popular story of Kalidasa, who is the famous dramatist and poet. And it is said that as a youth, Kalidasa was so foolish that he actually was cutting the branch of a tree on which he was seated. So naturally he fell and he hurt himself grievously, he hurt himself seriously. But later he got a blessing, a boon from Goddess Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and he began to compose very beautiful works in literature in Sanskrit. So this is one example of myth. Other example of myth is the Roman mythology, and it is the story of the twin brothers Remus and Romulus. It is said that when they were born, the enemy of their grandfather, the grandfather's name was Numitor, the king of Alba Longa. The enemy of Numitor, the king of Alba Longa, wanted to kill these two twins. So, in order to protect these two twins, these twins, they were put in a basket in a river Tiber, and they flowed along with the currents of the water. And it is said that they were found by a she-wolf who thought them to be her own. So she suckled them, looked after them, and after many days they were found by a shepherd and his wife, and they looked after them. They grew up, and Remus and Romulus fought with each other. Remus was killed, and Romulus founded the city of Rome. So this is another example about the Roman mythology. Then another example is about the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. We know Christopher Columbus discovered America, but there is a myth hidden. And it is said that when he set sail to discover America, at that time the people believed that the earth was flat. And his appearance in America was like a miracle. And he had a lot of difficulty in having sponsors because people naturally did not want to go on a ship which would go straight to the edge of the earth and fall off. And his crews also mutinied. They also revolted because they didn't want to go to the edge of the earth. So this is a very interesting story, but it is a myth. Because everyone at the time believed that the earth was not flat. The earth was round, because globe had already been discovered and globe is round, so that is also a myth. So all these are the different examples of myth. Then the second is about the legends. So what are legends? Legends are stories about the real people and the individual achievements. They contain some grain of truth in them, but the achievements are exaggerated. Nepalima भन्छ नि बढाई चढाई गर्नु. The achievements are exaggerated to make the story more interesting and to make the heroes more admirable. So this is about the legend. And the examples of legend is, one such example is Ramayana. And we all know, we are very familiar with the story Ramayana. It is said that Rama, he had to go on an exile for 14 years, and at that time when they were in exile, the king of Lanka, Ravana, was very lured. He was very attracted to the beauty of Sita, so he kidnapped her and took her to Sri Lanka. So now it was the duty of Rama to rescue Sita. So Sri Lanka is in the other continent, So he had to go to the south of India, and in the south of India there is a place called Park Strait. It is known as the Adams Ridge. So he went to the Adams Ridge, and there now he had to cross the ocean to go to Lanka. So he built a bridge of stone. Then he went to Sri Lanka. He fought a war with Ravana. He defeated Ravana and he came back, and on the way back it is said that with the end of his bow he broke that wooden bridge, and the end of the bow is known as Dhanush Kodi. So since he broke the bridge with the end of the bow, so that place today is named as Dhanush Kodi. It is there in the Park Strait. in Adams Ridge. So after that he came back to, after completing his 14 years, he came back, and there was a lot of, came back to his kingdom, there was a lot of celebration, and at that time lights and all were lighted in all the houses of the people. So that is how Vijayadashami is celebrated. It was celebrated then, and even it is celebrated now. It is a sign of victory of good over evil. So after that, Ramchandra became the king, and he established a welfare state for the good of the people. So that is another one example of legend. Another example of legend is we get the story again from Ramayana, and it is the story of the descent of the Gangas. Descent means to come down to the earth. So it is said that river Ganga actually used to live in the heaven. So she came down to the earth, and the story goes like this. It is said that there was a war between the kings and the demons, and the demons used to hide under the ocean during the day, and they used to attack the gods. So the gods were very afraid of the demons. So they went and asked for help to a rishi, a sage. He was called Agastya. They went to Agastya, and Agastya was so powerful that he drank up the whole ocean. So now, in the war between gods and demons, the gods won, but there was a problem in earth, and the problem was there was no water, because the ocean had been drunk by the sage Agastya. So at that time, the gods, they knew that now goddess Ganga will have to be brought down to the earth. So it was believed that only Shivaji had the power to bring goddess Ganga down to the earth in the locks of his hair. Shivaji, he has a lock, he has a bun here. So in the locks of his hair, Ganga agreed at last to come to the earth, and she came to the earth, and then Shivaji released her in 7 streams. So that is why Ganga today is regarded as sacred, and a dip into the Ganga purifies all our sins. And it is regarded as a sacred river. So this is another example of a legend. Then another example of a legend is about the story about Hercules. Hercules, when he was a small boy, he saved himself from the snake when his stepmother tried to kill him. So that is another legend. And another legend is about Prometheus' bond, where Prometheus, he stole the fire from the gods and brought it to earth as a gift of man. So these all are the examples of legends. Then comes about the folk tales. So what are folk tales? Folk tales are again stories about the people, and sometimes they are also told in a form of songs. And the example is Meghaduta of Kalidasa. And in this Meghaduta of Kalidasa, we see Udayana. He kidnaps the daughter of King Pradyota of Vatsa. And at that time, there were many professional singers known as Charan Kavis. They used to go from place to place singing songs. So they also narrated many songs, many stories in a form of songs. So that is about Meghaduta. Then another folk tale is about, the popular story Ali Baba and the 40 Chor is also another folk tale. Another folk tale. And these folk tales actually, they take the audience to a different world altogether. And Ali Baba and the 40 Chor, I told you, is another folk tale. And in this we see a poor woodcutter discovers the cave where the riches were hidden, and his brother also tries to acquire the wealth, but his brother gets trapped and gets killed. And at last the bandits who had hidden all the wealth in the caves, they were also killed by the maid of Ali Baba. And so the moral of the story Ali Baba is that we should not be greedy. And there is one more folk tale, and it is about the story of Tom Thumb. He was so called Tom Thumb because he was no bigger than his father's thumb. And he experiences wild adventures of being swallowed and vomited by a cow, then a demon, and then finally by a fish. And the fish was cooked for the king, and finally Tom Thumb lands on the dining table of King Arthur and becomes his favorite. So these all are about the folk tales. Then the next thing is about the memoirs. So what are memoirs? Memoirs are collection of memories that an individual says about a particular event or moment in his life, and there are two categories: autobiography and biography. And autobiography is the story of the whole life of someone, of a person, and memoirs are certain incidents from life. So this is about memoirs, and the examples of memoirs are: one is Manikuntala Sen's Say Diner Katha. That means memories of the past. And in Say Diner Katha, Manikuntala Sen writes about the Direct Action Day when the Muslims, on 16th of August 1946, they declared the Direct Action Day, and on this day there was a communal riot between the Hindus and the Muslims. There was a lot of killing all over Calcutta, and it is known as Calcutta Killing, and it is also known as the Week of Long Knives. So this is one example of memoir. Another memoir is Narayan Sen's Ami Netaji Dekche. So that means I have seen Netaji. Ami Netaji ki Dekche. And he writes about the life history of Netaji and his political activities. Then there is another memoir, and the memoir is written by Sufia Kamal. And Sufia Kamal has written the Ekaterer diary, that means the diary of 1971, where she has written about the freedom movement of Bangladesh and a birth of a new nation. Then there is another memoir, example of memoir is Ashalata Sarkar's book, Ami Surya Sener Shishye, I am the disciple of Surya Sen, and there she mentions about the anti-British feeling, anti-British movement, and also about the revolutionary movement in Bengal. And so that is the thing. And also the last is not a memoir, it is an autobiography, and it is written by Manna De. Manna De wrote Jivaner Jal Sagar. It is the history of music, and he was an internationally famous person. So this is all about the examples of memoir. Then the next is about the oral traditions. So what are oral traditions? It is when history of a community is transmitted in a form of accounts, stories, or records, then that is known as oral traditions. And the example of oral tradition is the Bible story of Noah's Ark. It is said that God wanted to punish the evildoers by drowning them. But God is love. God does not, abandon His creation. So God also took measures to save His creations. So what God did is that God told Noah, who was a very simple and a very pious person, he told Noah to build a boat. So Noah built a boat, and when the flood took place, everyone who went in the boat, whoever boarded the boat, were all saved. So this is the story about Noah's Ark. Then there are writings of ancient Greece, which were all compiled and written into history by Herodotus, who is the father of history. He is the author of Historia, and also Thucydides. He wrote about the Peloponnesian War, and he is known as the scientific historian because he wrote from the eyewitnesses. Then another oral tradition is about the oppression that was done to the indigo cultivators by the planters. We become aware of the evil that was done to the cultivators. And the next example is about Khudiram Bose, the martyrdom of Khudiram Bose. He was made a martyr. He was hanged to death by the British at the age of 18. And the reason why he was hanged to death is because he, along with Prafulla Chaki, they tried to throw a bomb in the carriage of Kingsford to kill Kingsford, because Kingsford was very unpopular British officer. So they threw a bomb in the carriage just in front of Kingsford's house. But what happened? Mistakenly, they killed Mrs. Kennedy and her daughter because Kingsford was not there. So Prafulla Chaki committed suicide, but Khudiram Bose was made a martyr. He was hanged to death. And at that time, people were very upset. And there was a song, Ek Baar Bidai Dema, Bid Me Farewell, was the song that became very popular. It was a heart-rending song which made the people very upset. It was a very touching song. So all these are the oral traditions. So I finished what are myths and the examples. Now I will be dealing how do they shape the human mind. What are the importance of myths, legend, folk tales, memoirs and oral traditions. So the importance is that first I will deal with myths. So the importance of myths is that the word sunrise is also like the word myth, because when you say sunrise, the sun does not literally blaze into the sky every morning. And another thing is that it helps us to form human consciousness, and it helps us to know what is important to know. And 3 is a mythic number, because even in Catholicism, they believe in Holy Trinity, Father, Son and the Holy Spirit. So 3 is a mythic number. Then even in history they have 3 epochs: ancient, medieval and modern. And even in the 3 forms of government, legislature, executive and the judiciary, down to the 3 blind mice, where the mice pretend to be blind in order to steal the apple pie from a farmer's wife. So 3 is a mythic number, and this myths, they help us to know the roots of our culture. It is related to the present, so it helps us to know about the past. And also the myths, it helps us to decide what is right and what is wrong. So that is the importance of myths. Now, the importance of legends is that legends are very interesting stories, and they are very intriguing form of storytelling, because we want to believe that they are true, that they are real, and the legends, they become our role model, and they gain a place in our heart, in our mind. And another is about the legend, about the folk tales. These folk tales, they make the common people, at least they free the common people from the boredom of everyday routine life. From the stressful routine life, common people are bored are freed from the boredom. They are freed from the boredom. And we also know about the rules and regulations of the society, about the different community, and also we know about the different communities from the folk tales. Then memoirs. Memoirs are written by respectable people, are very, very important because they are eyewitnesses, and these memoirs, they they are eyewitnesses, and example is, we come to know about the barbaric behavior of the Pakistani army on the freedom fighters of Bangladesh, because the Pakistan army took every measures to hide all that was happening in Bangladesh at that time. So memoirs are important for that. And oral traditions are very important to us, because it was very important during the primitive age, and even today it is important, because it was because of the oral traditions that we came to know that history was mostly written only about the kings and wars. History was never written about the common people. So now the historians who are known as subaltern historians, subaltern means common people. So historians who wrote about the subaltern people, common people, now they started to write history about the common people. And about the common, we come to know that about the stories of the about that, and also we come to know that about the British rule, because during the British rule many exploitation, torture could not be voiced out by the people. So they were preserved in the minds, and after independence they were preserved in history books. And in 1997 the Canadian Supreme Court said that oral traditions have the equal value as preserved histories, but there are a lot of exaggeration, but we cannot stop that exaggeration. So these are all about myths, legend, and how they shape the mind, and the importance of myths and legends. And so, our past is full of treasures, full of knowledge. So we need to explore. We need to, explore. We need to find out. The more we find out, the more interesting stories, the more interesting information we get from the past. And this way we will be able to quench our thirst for knowledge if we study about the past. So this is the first question, and it is very important. I told you there are two parts, the same question. So I've dealt with the first question. Now the next question is about describe the colonial view of Indian history. How did the Indian scholars react to the colonial construction of Indian history? So colonial view here means, what did the British say? What was the opinion of British regarding Indian history? And here now, when the British, naturally the British all criticized about Indian history. So the Indian scholars who were known as the nationalists, they were the ones now who started to react. They started to write the history of India. So now I will deal with the second question, describe the colonial view of Indian history. So, that it is not that history was not written before the coming of the British. History was written, but I told you it was all written about the elite class, the rich people of the society. So, writing of history started on modern lines with the coming of the British in the second half of the 18th century. And the colonial historians, they were highly critical. They wrote against the Indian people, because they wanted to justify the British rule by projecting the superiority of the British culture. They wanted to show that British culture is far superior, far better than the Indian culture. And at that time, there was one historian, Alexander Doe. In 1717, Alexander wrote the history of Hindustan. And in this history of Hindustan, he said that the political system of India, or the feature of the political system of India, was despotism. Despotism means cruel rule, where one person rules like a dictator. He is all powerful. People don't enjoy any power. So he said that there was despotism. And also the colonists, they had a very poor picture of India. They gave a very poor picture of India, saying that the Indians were very engrossed only in spiritual affairs, and they were not bothered about the problems of the world. So that way they tried to criticize India. And in 1817, James Mill wrote the history of British India. He wrote this history of British India in 3 volumes in 1817. And he wrote about the history of British India without even coming to India, nor knowing any of the Indian languages. And he said that the Indians were very corrupt, insincere, they were very backward, they were uncivilized, they did not have any political ideals, and the books written by the colonists were mostly dominated by the colonist viewpoint. Every books written by them were in favor of the British, and the colonists argued that the India's past was very static, unchanging, and there was no political consciousness in India, there was no political unity in India. The Indians were not fit for self-rule, and the glorious past of India was borrowed from Greece. And they try to highlight the backwardness and the undeveloped condition of India, and they try to study the past by criticizing the achievements of the past, and they showed the colonial mindset by creating a difference between the Indians and the British. So naturally, all these criticisms made the nationalist historians very, very angry. So now the colonialist nationalisms wanted to react, so they started to react. So how they reacted is that they became very upset, they were shocked by the colonial interpretation of Indian history, and not only that, but they were highly critical about the criticism of the India's past. And so the historians now, they took up the challenge and they started to rewrite the history of India. So history of India was rewritten, and at that time they gave a rational approach. That means they started to write systematic history. New methodology was implied, and then they started to write a systematic history, and they gave importance to awareness, India's pride, confidence of the people. And so this way you can see that they started to react. And in the beginning of the 20th century, Hemchandra Roy Chowdhury and Radha Kumud Mukherjee, they started to now study about the sources of India, the literary sources, the coins, the inscriptions. Inscriptions are things that are engraved on hard materials, so they began to study the past, and they came to the conclusion that India had a political history. I mean, India had unity, because one example is about the empire of Chandragupta Maurya, who is regarded as the first empire builder of India. He established the first empire. So without political unity, it would not have been possible. So that is one example, and they also try to show that Indians were expert in the administrative matters, and the India's glorious past was not borrowed from Greece. It was indigenous, it was native, and also they said that the spirituality of India was far better than the materialistic West. And at that time there was one historian, his name is K.P. Jaiswal. K.P. Jaiswal, he was against despotism. As Alexander Dow said that India was despotic, he was against despotism, which was expressed by the British, and he justified against despotism by saying that in India there were republics during the 6th century, during the time of the Mahajanapadas. There were 2 republics, Vajji and Malla, where there was democracy and representative form of government, where people enjoyed power, where people chose their leader to represent and voice their grievances. So he justified about despotism. And also Ram Sharan Sharma, he said that India did have self-rule. That is why, they managed they could manage the affairs in the present. Without self-government in the past, how could India manage the affairs in the present? So that was the argument that Sharma wrote, said. And also, there was one historian, V.A. Smith, and V.A. Smith wrote 2 books. The early history of India in 1908 and the Oxford History of India in 1919. And in both these books, he said that the Indian, he had said that the Indian, the Indian armies were very inferior and all that. So, the British, so against this, the Indians, they try to justify. And there are many historians. There are many historians like who wrote books about India, and those historians are, one is this person, Dadabhai Naoroji. He wrote Poverty and British Rule in Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Then another was R.C. Datta. He wrote the economic history of India. Then this Jadunath Sarkar, he wrote the downfall of the Mughals. Then R.C. Majumdar wrote history and the culture of the Indian people in 11 volumes. So all these books were wrote in favor of India, and so this way, the Indian nationalists argued in favor of India, and they tried to uphold the glorious past. They try to uphold the glorious past, which we should be proud of, and they also gave importance to national sentiments. And they, at last, they held the British responsible for the backwardness and underdeveloped conditions of India. So this way you can see that they reacted to the colonial criticism. But criticism is very, very important in life, because it is because of criticism we evaluate ourselves and we try to improve. So here also, because Indian history was criticized, so the Indian nationalists got the opportunity to evaluate the past, and they were able to rewrite and overcome the weaknesses of India. So all these are about the colonist and the nationalist view of history. So I finished the 2 thing, and there is one question which came this year. So with this I will end my first class, and I want you all to at least be disciplined. Because of the lockdown, we don't tend to be disciplined. So you have to be disciplined. So at least, read, 2-3 pages a day at least, because we have to be updated. It is very important to be updated, because as soon as the lockdown will be over, then next year you will have to sit for the board exam. So it is important to be disciplined. Thank you so much.